Chama, New Mexico. August 1973. The sun is brutal. 98 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. An 80-year-old man is sitting on a horse. His name is Chester Mullins. He's wearing a dusty cowboy hat, a faded bandana, and the same boots he's worn for 40 years. His hands are shaking. Not from fear, from age. The director, George Seaton, is getting impatient. They've been trying to get this one shot for 45 minutes, a simple ride-by. Chester just needs to gallop past the camera, tip his hat, and keep going. But Chester's horse keeps veering left. His timing is off. His hands won't cooperate. Cut. Seaton yells for the 8th time. He throws his script on the ground. Get this man off my set. He's costing us money. Find someone else. The assistant director starts walking toward Chester. The old man's face goes pale. He knows what's coming. After 50 years in this business, after 300 westerns, after being a real cowboy before Hollywood even existed, he's about to be thrown away like a broken prop. That's when Dean Martin stepped forward. Hold on a minute. Everyone turned. Dean Martin, the star of this picture, the man whose name was above the title, was walking toward the director. George, can I talk to you for a second? What happened next didn't just save an old man's job. It reminded everyone on that set what Hollywood used to be about, and what it had forgotten. To understand why what Dean Martin did mattered, you need to understand who Chester Mullins was. Chester Mullins wasn't an actor. He was a cowboy, a real one. Born in 1893, in Abilene, Texas. Grew up on a cattle ranch. Started working drives when he was 14 years old. By 1915, he was one of the best ropers in the Southwest. Won 3 rodeo championships before he turned 25. Then Hollywood came calling. In the 1920s, studios discovered that the best way to make westerns look authentic was to hire actual cowboys. Men who knew how to ride. Men who knew how to rope. Men who knew how to rope. Men who knew what the West really looked like before it became a movie set. Chester Mullins arrived in Los Angeles in 1923. He was 30 years old, looking for work during the off-season. Someone told him the studios were paying good money for riding extras, cowboys who could gallop past a camera without falling off their horse. His first job paid $10 a day plus a box lunch. He thought it was the easiest money he'd ever made. That first job turned into 50 years. Chester Mullins appeared in over 300 westerns. He worked with Tom Mix in the silent era. He doubled for Randolph Scott in the 1940s. He rode alongside John Wayne in Stagecoach and Red River. He was there when Gary Cooper filmed High Noon. But here's the thing about being a riding extra, a background player, a face in the crowd. Nobody remembers your name. Chester never had a speaking role, never got a screen credit, never made more than $50 a day in his entire career. He didn't have a pension. He didn't have savings. He had a 1-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood and a 20-year-old pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it. By 1973, Chester Mullins was 80 years old. His wife had died 3 years earlier. His only son had been killed in Korea. He had nothing left except his work. And now George Seaton wanted to take that away from him. Now, about George Seaton. George Seaton was a good director. He'd won 2 Academy Awards. He made Miracle on 34th Street. He made Airport. He was a professional. But Showdown was his last film, and he knew it. He was 62 years old, tired, and under pressure from Universal to bring the picture in on time and under budget. When you're under that kind of pressure, you don't have patience for an 80-year-old man whose hands shake. You just want someone who can hit their mark. Dean Martin walked over to George Seaton. The crew watched in silence. George, what's the problem? Sighed and gestured toward Chester. The old man can't do the shot. We've been at this for almost an hour. I need someone who can actually ride a horse. He can ride a horse. Dean, you saw what happened. He can barely control the animal. Dean looked over at Chester. The old man was still sitting on his horse, staring straight ahead, trying to hold on to what was left of his dignity. How many westerns has he done? Dean asked. Seaton frowned. I don't know. Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. Dean turned to the assistant director. Hey, someone find out how many pictures this man has worked on. There was a scramble. Someone ran to the production office. A few minutes later, an assistant came back with a piece of paper. According to the casting records, Mr. Mullins has appeared in approximately 300 Western films since 1923. Dean nodded. He turned back to Seaton. 300 films, George. This man has been making Westerns since before you and I were born, since before talkies, since before most of these crew members' parents were born. Dean paused. And you want to throw him off the set because he had a bad morning? Dean, we're burning daylight here. Every minute we waste is money. I know. Dean reached into his pocket and pulled out his cigarettes. He lit one, took a long drag. Tell you what, give me 20 minutes with him. If he still can't do the shot, I'll pay for the extra time myself, out of my salary. Seaton stared at him. You're serious. As a heart attack. Dean walked over to Chester Mullins. The old man looked down at him, embarrassed. His hands were still trembling. Mr. Martin, I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Your hands are fine. Dean patted the horse's neck. What's this guy's name? Dusty. Dusty, good name. Dean looked up at Chester. You know what your problem is? Sir, you're thinking too much. You've done this 1,000 times. You don't need to think about it. You just need to do it. Chester shook his head. I used to be able to. But now, everything's slower. My reactions, my balance. So what? You think John Wayne does his own stunts anymore? You think I do? Dean smiled. We all get slower. That's just life. But slow doesn't mean finished. Chester was quiet for a moment. Then he said, They want to replace me. Nobody's replacing you. Mr. Martin, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But I heard the director. He wants someone else. Dean took another drag of his cigarette. You know what the director wants. He wants a good shot. That's all any director wants. And you're going to give him one. How? By remembering who you are. Dean looked up at him. You're Chester Mullins. You've been riding horses since before movies had sound. You've worked with Tom Mix, John Wayne, Gary Cooper. You've forgotten more about being a cowboy than anyone on this set will ever know. He dropped his cigarette and ground it out with his boot. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take a deep breath. You're going to stop thinking about the camera. Stop thinking about the director. Stop thinking about your hands. And you're going to ride past that camera like you've done 10,000 times before. Chester stared at Dean for a long moment. Why are you doing this? He finally asked. You don't know me. Dean shrugged. I know enough. I know you've given 50 years to this business. I know you deserve better than to be thrown out like yesterday's newspaper. He paused. And I know what it feels like when everyone assumes you're finished. They called for the shot. Chester Mullins sat up straight on Dusty. He adjusted his hat. He wrapped the reins around his weathered hands, hands that had roped cattle, broken horses, built fences, and buried a wife and a son.
Action!
Chester kicked Dusty into a gallop. He rode past the camera, tipped his hat, and disappeared out of frame. Perfect. One take. The crew started to applaud. George Seaton walked over to Dean. Now, that was unexpected. Dean shrugged. He just needed a minute. He needed more than a minute. He needed someone to believe in him. Seaton paused. That was a decent thing you did. It wasn't decent. It was right. There's a difference. Seaton considered that. You know, Dean, sometimes I forget why actors like you last as long as you do. It's not just talent. Don't get sentimental on me, George. We've still got a movie to make. That night, the production threw a small dinner for the cast and crew at a local restaurant in Chama. Dean Martin was sitting at a corner table with Rock Hudson when Chester Mullins walked in. The old man looked uncertain, out of place among the movie stars and executives. Dean stood up and waved him over. Chester, come sit with us. Chester hesitated. Mr. Martin, I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding. Sit down. Chester sat. A waiter brought him a menu. He looked at it, then looked at Dean. I want to thank you for what you did today. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me. Forget about it. I can't forget about it. Chester's voice was thick. Do you know what this job means to me? It's all I have left. When my wife died, when my boy didn't come back from Korea, this work was the only thing that kept me going. Getting up in the morning, putting on my boots, going to a set. It's stupid, I know. I'm just a background player. Nobody sees me. But it's what I've got. Dean was quiet for a moment. Then he said, It's not stupid. It's the opposite of stupid. You found something that gives your life meaning. Most people never find that. Rock Hudson leaned forward. Chester, how long have you been doing this? 50 years this November. 50 years. Rock shook his head. Dean, we should tell George to put this man in the credits. Dean nodded. We should. Dean Martin did more than that. He went to George Seaton the next day with a request. Chester Mullins would receive a special acknowledgement in the film's end credits. Seaton hesitated. Dean, we've never done that for an extra before. Then let's be the first. The studio will ask questions. Tell them the star insisted. Dean smiled. They won't argue with that. When Showdown was released in June 1973, audiences who sat through the end credits saw something unusual. After the standard cast and crew listings, there was a single line, "Special thanks to Chester Mullins, 50 years a cowboy." Most people didn't know who Chester Mullins was. They probably assumed he was a consultant, or a location manager, or someone's relative. But Chester knew. And that was enough. Chester Mullins worked for 3 more years after Showdown. His last film was a television western in 1976. He was 83 years old. His hands still shook, but directors had learned to work around it. Word had gotten around about what Dean Martin had done. Chester Mullins became something of a legend among the old-timers, a living connection to Hollywood's earliest days. He died in February 1977, in his sleep, in his 1-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood. When they cleaned out his belongings, they found very little. Some old photographs, a few rodeo ribbons from the 1910s, a stack of call sheets from films nobody remembered, and one framed item on his wall, a photocopy of the end credits from Showdown. Special thanks to Chester Mullins, 50 years a cowboy. His landlord, a woman named Margaret Torres, had known Chester for 15 years. She was the one who found him. He talked about that movie all the time, she later told a reporter. Not because he was proud of being in it, because someone had finally seen him. After 50 years, someone had finally seen him. At Chester's funeral, a small affair, maybe 20 people, there were flowers from Dean Martin. The card read, "To a real cowboy. Thanks for teaching me what this business is supposed to be about, Dean." Chester's landlord kept that card. She showed it to anyone who would listen. "Dean Martin sent flowers," she would say. "Can you believe it? Dean Martin, for a man nobody knew." Dean Martin never talked about Chester Mullins in interviews. He never mentioned the incident on his TV show, never used it to burnish his image, never told the story at Hollywood parties. That's because for Dean Martin, what he did wasn't remarkable. It was simply what you did. You treated people with respect. You remembered that everyone on a set, from the star to the lowest grip, was a human being with a story, a family, a life. You didn't throw people away because they were old, or slow, or inconvenient. Rock Hudson told a version of this story in a 1985 interview, shortly before his own death. "We were filming in New Mexico," he said, "and there was this old cowboy extra who was having trouble with a shot. The director wanted to fire him. Dean stopped the whole production to stand up for this man. He said, 'This man has been making westerns longer than any of us have been alive. He deserves our respect, not our impatience.'" The interviewer asked, "What happened to the old man?" "He did the shot perfectly," Rock said. "One take." Dean gave him his confidence back. And at the end of the picture, Dean made sure the man got a special credit. "First time I'd ever seen that done for an extra." "Did you stay in touch with the old man?" Rock shook his head. He died a few years later. But Dean sent flowers to the funeral. I remember thinking, that's who Dean Martin really is. Not the guy with the drink and the cigarette and the easy jokes. The guy who sends flowers to a funeral for someone nobody remembers. Showdown was Dean Martin's last Western. He made a few more films after that, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. The movies were changing. The old Hollywood, the one where Chester Mullins had built a career, where cowboys and extras and character actors could make a living, was disappearing. But for one afternoon in New Mexico, in August 1973, the old values held. A star stood up for a man nobody cared about. A director changed his mind. An 80-year-old cowboy rode past a camera one more time. And 50 years of invisible work finally became visible. The story of Dean Martin and Chester Mullins isn't about celebrity. It's not about power or fame or box office returns. It's about seeing people. really seeing them. Chester Mullins spent half a century in the background of Hollywood. Nobody asked his name. Nobody learned his story. He was just a figure on a horse, a shape in the dust, a face in the crowd. Then one day, one star, in one moment, chose to see him. That's the Dean Martin story that should be told. Not the cool guy with the martini glass. Not the Rat Pack singer with the effortless charm. The man who stopped a production to defend an 80-year-old cowboy. The man who made sure a forgotten name appeared in the credits. The man who sent flowers to a funeral for someone nobody knew. Because that's not just kindness. That's legacy. If this story about seeing the people others overlook moved you, subscribe and hit that thumbs up. Share with someone who's ever felt invisible in their work. Have you ever had someone finally see you after years of being overlooked? Let us know in the comments. Ring that notification bell for more untold stories about Dean Martin's legacy.